At 85, when Jack Nicklaus is mentioned, people still call him by the immortal nickname Golden Bear, the Golden Bear of the golfing world. He is not just an athlete, but a living monument of American sports. With 18 major titles, a record yet to be touched, Nicklaus is regarded as the greatest golfer of all time. 6 Masters victories, 4 U.S. Open triumphs, 3 Open Championship wins, and 5 Wanamaker trophies from the PGA Championship. Each achievement is a milestone etched deeply into history. Beyond that, he secured 73 PGA Tour wins and 117 professional victories worldwide, becoming a model of resilience and excellence. The legendary 1986 Masters moment, when at 46 he staged an astonishing comeback to win, became an enduring symbol of grit and courage. Off the course, he left his mark by founding the Memorial Tournament, designing over 300 golf courses worldwide, and establishing the Nicklaus Children's Health Care Foundation, an organization that has saved countless children's lives. If limited to achievements, Nicklaus would forever be the uncrowned king of golf. But that aura has gradually crumbled under the ravages of time. At 85, he walks slowly, his back aching from decades of swinging clubs, his eyes dimming, making each step on the honorary Masters course a challenge. The tragedy isn't just physical decline but also emotional loss. The sudden death of his grandson Jake in 2005, the passing of friends and legendary rivals like Arnold Palmer, leaving Nicklaus quietly as the last survivor. Yet in that darkness, his eyes still gleam with unyielding resolve. He no longer swings to conquer 300-yard drives, but to remind the world that the Golden Bear's warrior spirit endures, that his true legacy isn't just golden trophies, but the strength to overcome pain, loss, and turn suffering into a force for love, giving and pressing forward, however tremulously, affirming an eternal truth. Time may take strength, but it can never take spirit. Jack Nicklaus's childhood began in Columbus, Ohio, a peaceful yet harsh city for the boy born in 1940. If he was later called the Golden Bear, the indomitable Golden Bear on the golf course, in the small house in Upper Arlington, Jack was just a boy growing up under the iron discipline of a strict father and the quiet reserve of a mother who rarely showed affection. His father, Charlie, a pharmacist and passionate sports lover, taught Jack how to grip a golf club, planting in his young heart a love for baseball, basketball, and especially golf. But Charlie wasn't one to offer praise easily. Every achievement of Jack's came with a scrutinizing gaze, as if success was never enough. His mother, Helen, from a German family, maintained a calm distance. She loved her son but rarely expressed it in words or gestures. In that home, love existed quietly, and Jack learned to understand affection through silence more than embraces. The young Nicklaus grew up feeling that love had to be proven through results, that his worth lay in meeting expectations. From his teenage years, Jack stepped onto the fairways, not just to play but to seek recognition, to prove he wasn't invisible. As a child, he excelled in multiple sports, but only with a golf club in hand did he feel he could escape the shadow of his family's silence. On the golf course, no one questioned whether he was loved. Only the straightness of his shots and the numbers on the scoreboard mattered, undeniable measures of his worth. Yet the greatest pain struck in 1970, when his father, both his foundation and his greatest pressure, died of pancreatic cancer at 56. Jack, then 30, and at the peak of his career, felt that loss like a dagger to the heart. His entire childhood had been spent craving a word of praise from his father, a single, "I'm proud of you." But that moment never came, and when Charlie passed, that wound became permanent. The Iron Man of golf, who could withstand any pressure on the course, crumbled in the silence of his grief. Jack didn't cry in public, but those close to him said he sat for hours staring into space, as if a piece of his childhood was buried with his father. That loss drove him to greater determination but left an unfillable void. In his heart, his father remained the one who first brought him to the course, but also the one who never truly said he loved him. This invisible wound followed Nicklaus to the end of his days, shaping a man who lived by discipline and achievement, but sometimes lost the freedom of his soul. He grew accustomed to solitude from a young age, swallowing sadness and facing the world with a calm facade. That rigor forged a champion but left the boy Jack without a carefree childhood. At 85, looking back, Nicklaus still speaks of his father with gratitude, but in his clouded eyes lingers a silent sorrow. Behind every swing, every victory, hides the boy who yearned for an embrace he never received, a word of acknowledgement that echoed only in his imagination. That lack of affection, coupled with the shock of losing his father, became an unhealed emotional wound, an invisible pain present in every slow step of the Golden Bear at the end of his journey. When childhood closed with discipline and the pain of losing his father, Jack Nicklaus entered his youth with a burning desire to prove himself. His talent shone early through major amateur victories, winning the U.S. Amateur in 1959 at just 19, then repeating the feat in 1961. In the eyes of American golf, the young man from Ohio was not just a phenomenon, but the next great successor to Arnold Palmer, the icon dominating the fairways at the time. Yet that very expectation planted an immense burden on Nicklaus. In 1962, at the U.S. Open in Oakmont, Jack faced off directly against the national idol Arnold Palmer in a fateful playoff. The two-year-old defeated Palmer on his home turf, before a crowd largely clad in Union Jack attire cheering for the King. That victory catapulted Jack Nicklaus to superstardom, but also made him a thorn in the side of Palmer's loyal fans. They didn't see in him the charisma or warmth of Palmer. They saw only a large, stoic, cold, relentless machine. Spectators booed. The press dubbed him Fat Jack, a jab at both his physique and mechanical play. To many, Nicklaus wasn't the hero they wanted but the one who stole joy from the true hero's hands. Ironically, his first major success opened a lonely journey. At the peak of triumph, Jack felt stark isolation. Unlike Palmer, he wasn't enveloped in the crowd's fervent love, but faced whispers and scornful looks. On the course, he was the youngest U.S. Open champion since Bobby Jones, but off it, he became a target of criticism. The price of genius wasn't failure but winning too early, making the world doubt him. In his early career, Nicklaus often walked onto the course amid hesitant applause mixed with jeers. He tried to stay composed, but inside, his loneliness grew. The boy who lacked affection at home now lacked it from the crowd. Nicknames like cold and mechanical clung to him, making him question whether victory was truly a reward or just a new burden. Yet Nicklaus didn't back down. He answered with results. In the years that followed, he racked up more major titles, proving he wasn't just the one who beat Palmer in a moment, but a true rival on every front. Still, the journey was far from easy. Each trophy raised widened the gap with the public. Each accolade from experts came with grumbles from skeptical fans. Nicklaus became the misunderstood genius, a great champion unloved. Deep in his soul, he knew his path would be unique, one paved with glorious light but shadowed by lonely darkness. In his 20s, when many were still chasing dreams, Jack Nicklaus held the lifelong dream of countless golfers, but in exchange, he lost the innocence of youth, the chance to be loved as an ordinary hero. He began his career with both radiant brilliance and enveloping shadows, a start both legendary and tragic, setting the stage for the greater tragedy of a monumental life. After the 1962 U.S. Open, Jack Nicklaus was no longer Ohio's golden boy. He became a winning machine, the most ruthless conqueror golf had ever known. The 1,960 seconds and 1,970 seconds were his golden era, when Nicklaus instilled fear on every course. He dominated the Masters with 6 victories, claimed the U.S. Open Silver Trophy 4 times, reigned at the Open Championship 3 times, and touched the Wanamaker Trophy of the PGA Championship 5 times. A total of 18 majors in his career. a number no golfer has since surpassed. They called him Golden Bear, not just for his robust frame and regal presence, but because he truly was a golden bear ruling the golfing jungle, leaving no rival unscathed. He stood atop the sport for 2 decades, and each time he stepped onto a course, spectators knew history might shift again. But behind that radiant glory, the cost piled high. Each major was a battle not only against rivals but against himself. To maintain perfection, Nicklaus trained relentlessly, managed his body like a machine, and, most crucially, sacrificed precious time with family. Barbara, his steadfast wife, swallowed tears as she raised their 5 children during his constant absences. He once promised never to be away from home for more than 2 weeks, but in the whirlwind of his career, that vow was often swept away. On nights away, Nicklaus lay in hotel rooms, staring out dark windows, hearing laughter from distant bars, his heart aching as he thought of his children growing up with moments he rarely witnessed. The pressure didn't end there. The public stopped booing, replaced by reluctant acceptance. But that acceptance came with a crushing expectation. Nicklaus had to win, always be number one. Any failure was deemed an unforgivable misstep. The press portrayed him as a cold machine, a man who only calculated and conquered. They rarely wrote of Jack as a flesh and blood human, with sleepless nights and silent worries. Outwardly, Nicklaus smiled, raised trophies, answered interviews with a calm voice. But inwardly, he broke apart piece by piece. The mounting pressures made Jack sometimes feel he wasn't living but trapped in an inescapable cycle. Once, he confessed that the 1,960 seconds and 1,970 seconds, his most golden era, were also his loneliest. He won more than anyone, but the joy of victory often faded right after the trophy ceremony. The flight home was hours of emptiness, when the camera flashes dimmed and only heavy silence remained. He once said, "People think I had everything, but in truth, many times I had nothing but exhaustion." That statement revealed a hidden darkness few saw. To become a legend, Nicklaus had to trade the peace of his soul. Jack's golden empire wasn't built solely on precise drives or cold-blooded putts. It was forged with blood, tears, the silent sacrifices of his wife and children, and inner turmoil. Each new title was like a golden brick added to his throne, but also a chain binding him to the seat of solitude. When Arnold Palmer, Gary Player, or Tom Watson left the course, they often smiled at the crowd, embracing joy whether they won or lost. But for Nicklaus, a smile was often just a mask. He didn't allow himself to lose, and when he won, he didn't allow himself to breathe easy. One match barely ended before he was thinking of the next. A championship was hardly savored before the pressure to stay on top swept it away. In that era, the Golden Bear was admired but rarely loved. He was a champion, but not a hero embraced in the hearts of spectators. He lacked the flair of Palmer, the wildness of Ballesteros. He had only cold precision, meticulous calculation, and the heavy gait of a giant carrying the world on his shoulders. The golfing world respected him, but even that respect came with distance, and that distance made Jack withdraw further into himself. He gave his youth to victories, but returning to an empty house, he felt the full weight of pain. The laughter of his children couldn't fill the void of the years he missed. Thus, Nicklaus's golden empire was not just a monument of glory but a testament to the cruelty of success. It was a blinding light that cowed rivals, but also a flame that scorched his private life. At 85, looking back, he understood that those years built an immortal monument, but also left him with a hardened heart, a soul full of cracks no trophy could mend. While the world saw Jack Nicklaus as an invincible giant on the golf course, behind the family door was a woman quietly bearing it all, Barbara, his wife since 1960. She didn't appear in the flash of cameras or hold gleaming trophies, but she was the foundation keeping the Golden Bear Empire standing. In the 1,960 seconds and 70 seconds, while Jack traveled the world, Barbara stayed home with their 5 young children, shouldering both father and mother roles alone. Jack promised never to be gone more than 2 weeks, but in reality, trips from Augusta to St. Andrews, Pebble Beach to Royal Birkdale, often shattered that promise. Barbara swallowed tears, smiled at her husband when he returned, then sent him off in silence, knowing his dream meant sacrifices for the whole family. She was often seen at the edge of the stands, clutching a handkerchief, her eyes following Jack's every swing. She didn't cheer loudly, but her heartbeat synced with each of his shots. Behind every victory, every jubilant embrace before the cameras, were nights Barbara stayed up caring for the kids. Moments she stood before a closed door, wondering if her husband would see their son grow or their daughter mature. Happiness and sacrifice in the Nicklaus family were always intertwined. A husband bringing home triumphs for America to celebrate, and a wife bearing all the hidden burdens. Jack loved Barbara, he never denied it, but his love often took a back seat to his drive to conquer. Barbara understood, but that didn't ease the pain. There were birthdays missed, family vacations canceled for sudden tournaments, cold nights with only the ticking clock for company. Barbara remained patient, gentle. She knew behind his cold exterior, Jack had a vulnerable heart, one not adept at expressing love. So she became the bridge of love for their children, the harbor for her husband to return to after each journey. Yet that resilience came at a cost. Years later, Jack admitted he feared losing Barbara, feared she might leave from loneliness, but she stayed. Because she knew love wasn't just being together but believing in and sacrificing for each other. They say Jack Nicklaus is a legend for his 18 majors, but to him, the greatest title was having a wife like Barbara. She traded her youth, her ease, to support a man who went out to conquer the world. At 85, as Jack slowly walks beside Barbara, his trembling hand holding hers, people finally see the full story. Behind the golden bear is an ordinary yet extraordinary woman. Without Barbara, there might not be the Nicklaus of today. And if there's a silent tragedy in his life, it's that his towering glory overshadowed his devoted wife, who sacrificed a lifetime to keep their family whole, allowing Jack to become a legend, but at the cost of lonely days swallowing tears. The 1986 Masters, the tournament that turned Jack Nicklaus from legend to immortal icon, was also the most grueling moment of his life. At 46, an age when most top golfers had retreated from the fierce race, the golfing world began calling him a man of the past, with media touting the rise of younger stars. Many believed the Golden Bear had gone to sleep, never to awaken again. But at Augusta that day, Jack Nicklaus did the unthinkable. In the final round, he played a near-perfect string of shots, scoring a birdie at hole 9, an eagle at 15, birdies at 16 and 17, and sealing it with a cold-blooded putt at 18. The crowd erupted, the stands shook with cheers, and the world exploded as the old man of 46 claimed his 6th green jacket, a victory called the most miraculous in golf history. It was the final roar of the Golden Bear, a miracle the sports world rarely witnesses. But behind the glory, a tragic truth loomed. That victory was also a farewell to the youthful legend. Nicklaus knew he had just climbed his final peak, and from now on, the slope would only descend. Right after the crowning moment, as applause still echoed through Augusta, an indescribable void surged within him. What's left to prove? The question haunted his mind like a shadow. His whole life had been lived under the pressure to win, to gain recognition, to surpass Palmer, to please a father long gone. And now, with it all realized, he suddenly found himself alone, as if he had hit the final shot of his life. That feeling haunted Nicklaus for years. The 1986 green jacket was both a blazing pinnacle and the tomb of his youth and insatiable drive. He returned home, embracing his wife and children, but the joy was no longer whole. In Barbara's eyes, Jack wasn't just the hero who won, but a weary man, shoulders heavy, heart cracked by the emptiness after glory. It was a bitter paradox. When one has everything, they realize there's nothing left to hold on to. For Jack Nicklaus, the 1,986 Masters was both a song of triumph and the desperate roar of a legend stepping into the twilight of his life. After the 1986 Masters miracle, Jack Nicklaus continued appearing on courses for years, but the radiance had dimmed. Instead of cheers for a conqueror, people watched him with eyes half admiring, half pitying. He moved to the senior tour, where legends past their prime sought a flicker of glory. As expected, Nicklaus claimed more titles, including 10 major senior wins. But behind those trophies was no longer boundless joy, only growing physical torment. Each swing was a cry from a battered spine, each step on the fairway a gritted battle against swollen knees. Nicklaus's body, once golf's most resilient machine, began betraying him. Chronic back pain, weary shoulders, hands trembling after millions of swings. Some mornings he sat for hours just to muster the strength to stand. Yet hours later, he donned a smile, signed autographs, and posed for photos with fans. Golf, once his salvation, transforming an Ohio boy into a legend, now turned into torment. Each time he placed a ball on the grass, Jack no longer felt freedom, only the tug of war between passion and physical pain. Yet Nicklaus refused to let go. When his legs and back failed him, he found another way to live with golf: course design. Nicklaus Design became his second empire, with hundreds of courses worldwide bearing the Golden Bear's mark. It was how he turned pain into creation, continuing to sow his love for golf into future generations. But even in this, sleepless nights from back pain clung to him, making rest elusive. The twilight of his career didn't come with a single defeat, but in fragments. Missed shots, tournaments abandoned due to pain, silent flights home. Nicklaus knew he was no longer the young man launching 300-yard drives, but an old man leaning on a cane to finish 18 holes. The greatest tragedy was facing that truth on the very grass that once lifted him to greatness. In his final days as a player, each round was no longer a battle with rivals, but a desperate fight against his own body. It was the moment a legend stepped into darkness, carrying both glory and unhealed wounds. In 2005, when the world still saw Jack Nicklaus as a symbol of resilience, living a fulfilled life with a large family, a sudden tragedy struck, leaving an unhealing wound in the Golden Bear's heart. That day, devastating news spread through the family. Jake Walter Nicklaus, Jack's 7-month-old grandson, son of Steve and Krista, drowned in a hot tub at home. In one fleeting moment of oversight, a misstep, the tiny angel was forever lost from loving arms. The world may remember Jack as a man of steel, a champion who never fell, but at that news, Jack Nicklaus collapsed instantly. The man who faced thousands of spectators, who bore the pressure of history's greatest matches, couldn't speak. Barbara wept in agony. Their children were shattered, the family like a grand tower crumbling. In Jack's eyes, the familiar light of faith and resilience flickered out, replaced by a suffocating void. For Jack, losing Jake wasn't just losing a grandson. It was a direct blow to his belief that family was an inviolable sanctuary, a place of absolute safety. His life had been devoted to golf, missing countless moments with his children, and he had consoled himself that old age would bring joy with his grandchildren. But cruel fate stole part of that future. In the days that followed, Jack was nearly lifeless. He canceled most of his schedule, indifferent to ongoing tournaments or projects. Pain too deep for words. That was all he could utter, then fell silent, letting tears fall quietly in the dark. That July, Nicklaus chose the Open Championship at St. Andrews as his farewell to elite golf. St. Andrews, the home of golf, where legends depart in twilight, became his final stage. As Nicklaus stepped to the tee box, the crowd saw not just an aging champion saying goodbye, but a grieving grandfather, eyes heavy with sorrow, face etched with loss. That final major shot wasn't to prove himself to the world, but to whisper a farewell to the grandson gone too soon. His gaze lifted to the sky as if saying, "Jake, this one's for you." Spectators wept, not just for the farewell to a monument, but for the fragile human beneath the invincible golden bear. But Jack and Barbara didn't let the tragedy become a consuming despair. From their grief, they sought to turn loss into legacy. They founded the Jake Pro-Am, a fundraising tournament at Bears Club, Florida. Each year, top golfers and close friends gather, not just to play but to honor a life lost too soon. All proceeds go to the Nicklaus Children's Healthcare Foundation, supporting medical care for children, those on the brink of life and death, as Jake once was. For Jack, it was the only way to keep his grandson alive. If he couldn't watch Jake grow, at least his name would live on, tied to the smiles of other children saved. Yet, no matter how many good deeds he did, that wound never healed. Each time he saw Jake's photo, each time he heard children's laughter, Jack felt his heart tighten. He once admitted that the loss was like a knife slicing into his soul, bleeding for a lifetime. Barbara said there wasn't a day they didn't think of Jake. At every family gathering, there was always an empty chair, a silence no one voiced. And in Nicklaus's eyes, though they shone with resolve, a lingering pain remained unsoothed. If Jack Nicklaus's career was built on victories, his personal life was marked by this tragedy. People may remember him for his 18 majors, the 1,986 Masters, or the hundreds of golf courses bearing his name. But for Jack, all of that paled compared to the choked sobs on the day his grandson passed. The Jake became a reminder. Greatness isn't just in legendary shots, but in how one faces irreparable loss. In that journey, Jack Nicklaus turned pain into an invisible thread, linking past to present, connecting the departure of a little angel to the chance for thousands of other children to live. At 85, walking slowly beside Barbara, the golden bear could take pride in his immortal career. But within, the wound named Jake still bled, like a fated verdict carved into his heart. Perhaps that was the greatest tragedy of Jack Nicklaus's life. Not missed swings or back pain, but the loss of a grandfather, forever bereft of a young smile he could never reclaim. The tragedy of Jake had barely begun to fade when the years that followed piled new pain onto Jack Nicklaus's soul. The passing of friends, rivals, and teammates who had shaped golf's history alongside him. In the 2010 seconds, the golfing world watched as its great torches dimmed one by one. For Jack, each death wasn't just sad news, but a knife cutting deeper into his aging heart, making him feel like the last survivor on a battlefield emptied of allies. Arnold Palmer, once the king, a national idol, and Jack's greatest rival in his early years, passed in 2016. To the public, it marked the end of an era. For Jack, it was the loss of a brother, a friend who had walked beside him for half a century. Jack once said, "When I looked over and no longer saw Arnold standing there, I knew a part of my life was gone too." They were once fierce rivals, one embodying charisma, the other discipline, but in the end, they became old friends, sitting together to laugh and reminisce. At Palmer's funeral, Jack stood silently, eyes blurred with tears, his once broad shoulders trembling like a child's. He knew from that moment he was truly alone. Then came Seve Ballesteros, the wild European face who revitalized the Ryder Cup and earned the respect of the American team. Seve died in 2011 from a cruel brain tumor. Jack didn't compete much with Seve, but he saw the Spaniard as a symbol of a new generation, a warrior who helped make golf a global sport. When Seve passed at 54, far too young for a legend, Jack was stunned. He realized even the brightest stars could vanish in an instant, and time spared no one, not Palmer, not Seve, not himself. Around the same time, many Ryder Cup teammates from years past, who had fought alongside Jack in fierce battles against Europe, passed away one by one, each name erased from his call list, each familiar face absent from reunions, weighed heavier on his heart. The Ryder Cup had been where friendships were forged in the heat of competition, where locker room laughter echoed decades later. But now, those laughs were only memories. Jack began to feel like an old soldier lost on a battlefield after a long war. He was still there, body scarred, but his comrades had fallen. Some nights in his quiet Florida home, he replayed old tapes, seeing Arnold smile. Civi's raised hand in triumph, faces now gone. He had survived, but the cost of survival was watching those he loved leave. People often hailed Nicklaus as the last of a golden generation, but few understood that title meant profound loneliness. As friends passed, Jack didn't just lose those who shared his memories. He lost parts of himself. Each funeral was a death knell for his own youth. He attended with sorrowful eyes, a trembling handshake for the widow, each time wondering, when will it be my turn? At 85, Nicklaus carried the pain not just of himself but of a generation vanished. He was the last witness standing, but that strength hit a heart sliced too many times by loss. The golden bear lived on, but in a circle of death, the deepest tragedy no victory could erase. As close friends passed, Jack Nicklaus faced another enemy, not named Palmer or Watson, not a young golfer on the course but his own body, the once great invincible machine now turning traitor. Throughout his career, Jack hit millions of swings, pouring his body's weight into each shot, twisting his back and shoulders to send balls soaring over 300 yards. Those drives once proved his superhuman strength, striking fear in rivals. But in old age, they left a different legacy: a worn spine, swollen knees, trembling hands, and nights of back pain so severe he could barely sleep. At first, Nicklaus fought back with cortisone injections, a temporary salve for the pain, but each shot was a fleeting sedative. The pain returned heavier, sometimes leaving him unable to stand straight for more than a few minutes. Some mornings it took half an hour to ease himself out of bed, each movement like a blade cutting into his spine. He sat there, sweat drenching his brow, recalling his youth when a hip turn sent balls hundreds of yards. That helplessness struck at the golden bear's pride. Once a monument of strength, he now struggled with daily motions, a silent humiliation no title could erase. In desperation, Jack turned to a new hope: stem cell therapy. He flew to Germany, meeting top experts to harvest stem cells from his own fat tissue and inject them into his worn joints and spine. The press buzzed, some calling it a chance for revival, others skeptical. But for Jack, it wasn't about science or fame. It was a gamble with his life. He didn't dream of returning to the Masters or rivaling Tiger Woods. He only hoped to walk without collapsing, to smile freely while holding a grandchild, to stand from a chair unassisted. The therapy brought some relief, but the pain never fully vanished. It merely changed form, from sharp stabs to dull aches, from sudden back spasms to long, weary nights. More brutal than a broken back or aching joints were his eyes. After decades competing under stage lights, under the harsh sun of hundreds of tournaments, Jack's vision declined rapidly. At first, he only needed reading glasses, but gradually, bright lights forced him to squint, and darkness became an enemy. Some evenings he stepped onto his porch, gazing at the garden, but the scene was a blur, the faces of his chattering grandchildren fading like shadows. In those moments, fear surged. If one day he could no longer see their faces, what would 18 majors mean? The eyes that once saw hundreds of yards, tracking every curve on the green, now struggled to recognize loved ones' smiles, the cruelest betrayal his body could inflict on a grandfather. Each time he attended the Masters as an honorary starter, Nicklaus was no longer the mighty golden bear the crowd once knew. He walked slowly, back bent, eyes reliant on thick glasses, steps tentative on familiar grass. Barbara often supported him, each clasp of her hand a reminder, "You're still here, but more fragile than ever." The crowd no longer roared. Many wept. They clapped not just for the legend but out of sorrow, watching a once invincible man wrestle with each step. Jack Nicklaus never complained. He still smiled, answered interviews with familiar calm. But those close to him said that many nights He sat alone, hands clutching his back, eyes fixed on the floor, silent. Glorious victories couldn't soothe the persistent pain. Photos with U.S. presidents couldn't grant him sleep. His body betrayed him, a battle he couldn't win. At 85, Nicklaus still clung to Pilates, a strict diet, and regular medication. But he knew these were mere delays, not escapes. In his dimming eyes, he saw his grandchildren play, their laughter a spiritual balm. "My greatest fear," he once confided to a friend, "is one day not seeing them anymore." That was the Golden Bear's greatest tragedy. A man who conquered the world now held one humble wish: to see his loved ones' faces one more day. His body betrayed him. Time was merciless. But Jack Nicklaus's eyes still gleamed with resilience. He accepted the pain, the decline, but never surrender. For his true legacy wasn't in 300-yard drives or 18 immortal majors, but in this: even as his body failed, he stood, leaned on his cane, and moved forward, leaving an eternal message that the human spirit is stronger than any pain. After years of his body's relentless betrayal, Jack Nicklaus appeared before the public transformed. No longer the towering giant striding boldly across lush fairways, he was an old man, back bent, steps slow and trembling. This image was clearest in April mornings at the Masters, the tournament tied to his name, during the ceremonial opening shot. Once, crowds watched Nicklaus for a breathtaking drive. Now, they held their breath, tracking each step to the tee box, fearing his legs might give way. Beside him was always Barbara, the devoted wife who'd become his wings, guiding a fading legend across the grass. Their clasped hands, once a symbol of partnership, now became an invisible cane propping up a crumbling icon. The crowd applauded, but the sound was different. It wasn't exultation or thunderous cheers for a victor, but claps laden with sorrow. Many eyes welled up seeing the Golden Bear, who once stunned the world, now carefully lifting each foot, trembling as he gripped his club, sending the ball a mere zisher yards, a faint echo of golden days. They wept, not just for age burying his strength, but for realizing that even immortal monuments grow fragile. Media captured it, flooding papers and screens. Photos of Nicklaus beside Gary Player and Tom Watson during the ceremonial shot became reminders that time spares no one. They wrote, "The Golden Bear has aged." But beneath those words was choked regret. Once criticized as cold, a heartless machine, now trembling in view, the world saw a flesh-and-blood man battling time, instinctively wanting to embrace him. For Jack, each Masters appearance was a self-reckoning. He didn't want to be remembered as a hunched shadow, but he knew it was an undeniable truth. He accepted it, and in that acceptance was pain. The place, once his shrine of glory, now mirrored the ravages of age. He stood in Augusta, where he'd donned the green jacket 6 times, heart echoing only the sounds of the past. The crowd loved him, more than before, but that love now carried a different hue. It was love for a fading legend, mixed with pity and regret. Nicklaus's immortal aura lived only in memories, old tapes, faded photos. Before the public, he was time's fragile symbol, proof that even the greatest cannot defy decline. That was Jack Nicklaus's tragedy. He defeated every rival, claimed every title, became a generation's monument, yet lost to the one foe no one beats: time. The public's image was no longer an invincible man, but a frail elder, sustained by his wife, met with the crowd's mournful gaze. Yet in that contrast, Nicklaus's greatness deepened. He taught the world that legends can tremble, immortals can be fragile, and true beauty lies in bravely facing the inevitable. Jack Nicklaus's appearances at the Masters, back bent, steps trembling, became a powerful image across newspapers and television. The media no longer wrote only of his mythical swings or unbreakable records, but delved into a cruel question. Was the Golden Bear's legacy fading with each wrinkle, each halting step? Papers that once called him a legend now ran headlines: "Too old, too weak, should he still appear?" Those words stabbed the heart of a man who fought a lifetime to prove himself, now doubted not for achievements but for age. In those days, Jack didn't argue or defend. He let his frail image fill the press, let harsh comments spread online. His silence wasn't surrender but another answer. He accepted that age was the final foe, that death loomed, and no title could hide it. The man who once launched 300-yard drives now sat hours massaging a weary back. The one who roused thousands to cheer now stepped onto the course to tearful applause. Nicklaus knew fighting back or feigning strength would only bear the truth further, so he chose silence. Silence as his final pride. But that silence also cast a shadow over his legacy. The public, especially the young, began to know Nicklaus not through his glorious triumphs, but through photos of a trembling old man leaning on a cane. They didn't see the 18 majors, the 1,986 masters, or the concession in 1969, only a body succumbing to time. That's the cruel paradox. His entire life was spent striving for an immortal legacy, but as old age arrived, it was that frail image that overshadowed his immortal achievements. Barbara was heartbroken seeing her husband scrutinized, but Jack just held her hand and smiled. "I have nothing left to prove," he whispered. Behind those words lay a world of sorrow, because in truth, Jack still yearned to be remembered as a great legend, but he understood that people cannot choose how they're remembered. Time strips away strength, and the media strips away the wholeness of an image. He was left with only one choice: acceptance. At 85, Nicklaus sat in his quiet Florida home, sometimes reading articles calling him a faded, withered legend. He wasn't angry. He knew those words were true. But deep down he hoped people would still remember what he gave to golf, to his family, to children through his charitable foundations. He understood that a legacy isn't a snapshot of the present, but millions of memories etched in history. Yet, he couldn't deny the pain of seeing his glory overshadowed. The tragedy wasn't the nearing end death comes for everyone, but having to watch his legacy be challenged, scrutinized, doubted while he was still alive. That was a different pain, quiet and bitter, sharper than any physical ache, and Jack Nicklaus, once deemed immortal, now sat silently before the encroaching darkness, accepting it with sad but unyielding eyes, the eyes of a man who knew, even if a frail image overshadowed, the spirit of the Golden Bear lived on in the memories of those who witnessed his glory. After years of his legacy being scrutinized, Jack Nicklaus found another path, not on the green fairways of Augusta or St. Andrews, but in the sterile white rooms of hospitals, where the cries of children mingled with the hum of ventilators. That's where he and Barbara chose to pour the rest of their lives. The Nicklaus Children's Health Care Foundation. Born from the pain of losing their grandson Jake too soon, the foundation raised hundreds of millions of dollars, expanding a network of medical support for children across the United States. But for Jack, every dollar donated, every hospital built, wasn't just a number, it was an invisible candle lit for Jake, the grandson he never got to see grow up. From the beginning, Jack told Barbara, "If we couldn't save Jake, let's save other children. That's how he'll live on with us." And so, from the darkness of tragedy, a light was kindled. The Nicklaus, named foundation, became more than a family project. It grew into a national movement. Golf tournaments for fundraising, auctions, charity dinners, all carried a deeper meaning, turning personal loss into collective hope. Jack once stood on the Masters podium, basking in the crowd's cheers, but standing in a hospital corridor, watching a child survive heart surgery, his eyes truly sparkled. There were no gold trophies, no roaring applause, but there was a piece he'd never touched in his storied career. In those children's eyes, he saw Jake's shadow, and in their revived smiles, a message, "Grandpa, I'm still here." Many praised Jack for raising hundreds of millions, for his immense influence drawing countless resources, but few understood that his drive wasn't for fame or to polish his name. It came from a wound that never healed, from the helplessness of holding a tiny coffin. From that, he vowed, No other family would endure what the Nicklauses had. So, at every new pediatric center's opening, Jack shed tears. To others, it was joy. To him, it was sorrow softened. Barbara, who stood by Jack all her life, now became the fire driving the foundation alongside him. She appeared at every event, microphone in hand, voice trembling but resolute, speaking of Jake, of the importance of giving children a chance to live. Jack often sat beside her, back slightly hunched, eyes dimmed by age, but whenever Jake was mentioned, he gripped her hand tightly, as if channeling his remaining strength to stand with her. Many old friends and colleagues wept seeing Jack in this role. They'd known him as an indomitable warrior on the golf course, but now saw a frail grandfather turning personal pain into communal strength. A colleague once said, "Jack made the greatest birdie of his life not at Augusta, but in those hospitals for children." Yet, despite the light those projects brought, the wound still bled. Some nights, Jack sat quietly in his study, holding a small photo of Jake. He whispered, "I've done my best, but I still miss you." Every saved child's smile could never replace the one lost. Charity was his way to endure, to turn memory into action, but his heart still bore the scar. At 85, with failing health, Jack often said the foundation was what got him up each morning. Without it, he might have surrendered to pain and loneliness. The Nicklaus Children's Healthcare Foundation became the thread tying him to life, the reason he still stepped out, cane in hand, to speak at podiums. Deep down, he knew it was the only way to keep Jake alive. And so, the light of charity shone through the darkness enveloping Jack Nicklaus's life. It didn't erase the pain but transformed it into a legacy. It didn't lessen his longing for his grandson, but made Jake's memory a lifeline for thousands of other children. That's how the Golden Bear, once remembered for 18 majors, is now remembered for a broken but vast heart, big enough to embrace the world. And in that tragedy, he found the true meaning of glory, not the dusty trophies, but the small lives still breathing, still smiling, because of the love of a grandfather named Jack Nicklaus. At 85, Jack Nicklaus lives in a quiet Florida home with Barbara, the wife who has stood by him for over 6 decades. Each morning, he wakes not with the zeal of an athlete stepping onto the course, but to a different battle, one against a body ravaged by time. Before he can sit up, he often lies still for a few minutes, waiting for the stabbing pain in his stiff spine to ease. Then, with Barbara's patient help, he slowly rises, his hand gripping a cane that's no longer a weapon to conquer fairways but a crutch to keep him going. Morning Pilates, once prescribed by doctors and therapists to ease his back pain, has become an essential ritual. He performs each movement with a trembling body, sweat rolling down, every small motion a silent battle. After those sessions come a handful of colorful pills, a small collection that holds a lifetime of glory now turned into a legacy of decline. Painkillers, blood pressure stabilizers, heart medications, and supplements to keep him from collapsing. The man who once raised a golden club in victory now faces these pills each morning as gatekeepers of his existence. He swallows them, along with both bitterness and gratitude, then sits quietly, his clouded eyes gazing at the balcony where Florida's sunshine floods in but cannot dispel the darkness in his mind. Each night is a nightmare for Jack. Chronic back pain denies him restful sleep. Many nights, Barbara wakes to find her husband sitting in a chair, clutching his back, eyes staring blankly into the void. He doesn't complain, but his silence weighs heavier than any groan. Sometimes he dreams of standing at Augusta in 1986, swinging the club that made the world erupt, but when he opens his eyes, all that remains is the ticking of the clock and the enveloping darkness. Sleep has become a luxury, and each morning he begins anew with an exhausted body. The loneliness deepens as friends, rivals, and the great companions of his era have passed away one by one. Arnold Palmer, Seve Ballesteros, Ryder Cup teammates, the laughter in the locker rooms of old, all now echo only in memory. He's become the last survivor of a golden generation. a solitary witness. Some days, he plays old tapes, watching their faces, hearing the cheers again, then quietly wipes away a tear no one sees. The glory vanished with them, and he alone holds those memories. But Jack Nicklaus isn't entirely left in the dark. His family remains, a small light keeping him from falling. Grown children, chattering grandchildren, Barbara always by his side with a steadfast grip. Each time he hears a grandchild's laugh, it's like an invisible dose of medicine, soothing the pain. Nicklaus once said, "My greatest fear is the day I can no longer see their faces." That fear haunts him, as his eyes, weathered by decades under the golf course sun, grow dim. Yet, as long as he can see, he strives to etch every smile, every look into his mind, as if storing them to fend off the coming darkness. Then comes the most moving moment, the Masters, the honorary tee shot. Once, Nicklaus strode to the tee box with a straight back, eyes blazing, the world awaiting his mighty swing. Now, he leans on a cane, hands trembling, each step heavy, Barbara guiding him. The crowd falls silent, then erupts in tearful applause as he raises his club, body shaking. The shot no longer travels far or strong. The ball rolls just a few dozen yards, but it's a swing that brings the world to tears. It's not the swing of a champion, but of a broken-winged warrior, determined to deliver one final shot to remind all that the Golden Bear's spirit has never fallen. In the stands, many young faces who never saw his prime watch this scene and understand that greatness isn't just in victories, but in how a man faces decline. And the older ones, who lived through the Nicklaus era, weep openly, seeing their youth, a piece of their lives, in that hunched back. The world cries together, knowing this isn't just a legend's farewell, but a mournful anthem bidding adieu to an era. At 85, Jack Nicklaus is no longer the invincible Golden Bear, but a trembling old man leaning on a cane, living day by day with pills, back pain, and memories of lost friends. Yet in that image, he becomes immortal. For immortality lies not in the body, but in an unyielding spirit. And Jack, the broken-winged warrior, proves to the world that even with clouded eyes and trembling hands, he can still make millions weep not for lost glory, but for the enduring strength of his spirit. At 85, after all the triumphs and ruins, Jack Nicklaus stands at the end of the road as a tragic witness to American sports. He conquered golf, defeated every rival on the course, etched his name into history with 18 immortal majors. But life always exacts its price. He lost to time, to illness, to losses no victory could soothe. The 300-yard drive is now a memory, his keen eyes now clouded, his once steady hands now trembling. Yet in those eyes, there's still a strange radiance, the light of resilience, of love, of a soul that refuses to yield. The world remembers Nicklaus for his 18 major trophies, the 1,986 Masters, the 1,969 Concession. But if it stops there, his legacy is incomplete. Jack's true legacy lies in how he turned tragedy into compassion. The death of his grandson Jake, a wound that never heals, transformed him and Barbara into sowers of hope through the Nicklaus Children's Healthcare Foundation. Every hospital opened, every child saved, is a whisper to Jake, "We're still living for you." As friends passed, as his body betrayed him, Jack chose not to lament but to smile quietly, dedicating his final years to the community, as if to prove that greatness lies not only in victory, but in rising after loss. To the public, Nicklaus is the Golden Bear immortal. To his family, he's the husband, father, grandfather who sacrificed years with them for glory, then returned with a broken but loving heart. And to himself, he's just a man scarred. Sleepless nights from back pain, silent tears for Jake, the fear of no longer seeing his grandchildren's faces. These make his legacy more human, more relatable, showing that even legends feel pain, loss, and love. The final image of Jack Nicklaus isn't a champion raising a trophy, but an old man walking slowly beside his wife and grandchildren. On the small path to the backyard grass, the sunset casts a long shadow over the lawn, enveloping his hunched back and silver hair. But in his eyes, a fire still burns. It's no longer the flame of ambition to conquer, but the flame of love, of resilience, of a life that's known enough glory and loss to understand that the most precious thing isn't records, but the moments holding loved ones' hands and hearing children's laughter. The legacy of Jack Nicklaus, therefore, is not measured solely by the number of majors, the golf courses he designed, or the funds raised for charity. It is measured by tears, by the times he fell and rose again, by how he transformed grief into compassion. As he walks in the twilight, the world sheds tears not only out of sorrow for an aging legend, but because they see themselves in him. Their victories and failures, their pain and love, their losses and resilience. The Golden Bear, in the end, is not an invincible giant, but a fragile human who turned that fragility into strength. And that is the true legacy in tears, a legacy that will echo long after he leaves this world, for it belongs not only to golf, but to the very heart of humanity. Reading the story of Jack Nicklaus, I carry a quiet sorrow like morning mist, yet feel compelled to bow in reverence to a life that turned tragedy into compassion. This is not just the legend of 18 majors, the man who lit up the 1,986 Masters at 46, or the symbol of sportsmanship in the concession of 1,969. This is a husband and grandfather who lived fully amidst invisible scars, the promise to never be away from home for more than 2 weeks, often broken, Barbara quietly carrying the family, and in 2005, the family's collapse when one 7-month-old grandson, Jake, drowned. He battled chronic back pain, sought cortisone shots and stem cell treatment in Germany just to stand, and feared the day his clouded eyes would no longer see his grandchildren's faces. In the public eye, the image of the Golden Bear, hunched and trembling, hitting the honorary tee shot at the Masters brought tears to American audiences, not for a mighty drive, but for the courageous fragility of a man. Friends past: Arnold Palmer, 2016, Seve Ballesteros, 2011, Ryder Cup teammates, leaving him the last survivor. And he chose to respond to fate by opening his heart. The Nicklaus Children's Healthcare Foundation raised hundreds of millions for children. The Jake Pro turned pain into chances for life. Each project a candle lit for his grandson. The lesson for Americans today: professional glory cannot save us from time. Only love, family, and community responsibility make a legacy endure. Be brave like Nicklaus, acknowledge limits, care for your health, be present with loved ones, and turn loss into concrete actions to help the vulnerable. A true legacy lies not on scorecards, but in the heart saved because we loved. If you feel the pain, resilience, and love that Jack Nicklaus left behind, please subscribe to our channel to join us in preserving these human legacies. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video, where we continue to honor the legends who live forever in America's heart.